Today we're going to do something special. We're going to debunk a movie review. Yeah, I didn't know you could do that, but we're going to do it today.
Hello, Scaredy Cats. It's me, Scaredy Matt.
Oh my god. It's Thought Slime. And he doesn't just have bad opinions on politics. He has bad opinions on movies, too.
For weeks, all anyone can ask me is, hey Matt, have you seen His House? Matt, when are you going to talk about His House? Matt, do people want to see a review of the film His House? And I thought, if that's what people want, I better do it. Only one problem. Whose house are we talking about? And I thought, well, they must be referring to Steve Miner's house from 1986. What? Who wrote this?
Get it? Because they both have house in the title. Thought Slime thinks the movie House doesn't know how to do comedy, but he thinks his comedy is just extra.
It must be referring to Steve Miner's house from 1986. That's the bit we're going with?
Yeah, I agree. It's not funny at all. You can't be criticizing a comedy movie if you often try to do comedy yourself and fail.
Okay, but we're actually going to talk about His House, right? Well, if that's what people want to see, that's going to do better numbers than that. Nobody remembers this movie. House is a 1986 horror comedy directed by Steve Miner based on a screenplay by Fred Dekker. You might remember Fred Dekker as the guy who did Night of the Creeps. A good movie that I'd much rather be talking about. Let me sum this up for you. Imagine Evil Dead 2, except the scary parts aren't scary and the funny parts aren't funny.
Look, House isn't a perfect movie, but it is funny, and it is scary. It's got a lot of good puppetry work as well. It's got a lot of good scenes in it. There's a lot of good aspects to it. Now, I know you're trying to make it look bad by comparing it to Evil Dead 2, the greatest movie of all time, my personal favorite movie. Hell, I got an Evil Dead 2 tattoo on my forearm. Like, I love Evil Dead 2, but you can't compare everything to it because that movie is perfection. Oh, it doesn't equate to the world's best horror movie. It must be dog shit. No, it's still a great movie in its own right.
Instead of a brilliantly charismatic performance from someone like Bruce Campbell, you get William Katt turning in a billowing fart of a performance as Roger Cobb, the least likable protagonist on a horror film I've seen in a good while. And I don't know how much of that I can pin on Katt, because the material he's given to work with is all over the place, because this movie cannot pick a tone to save its life.
Yes, it does. It's a horror comedy, just like Evil Dead 2. That's why you're making the comparison you're making. It's because it's a horror comedy. It does have a tone. It has a very specific tone. It's a fun horror movie.
All of the effects feel like lazy retreads of Evil Dead.
Question: how did House steal the ideas of Evil Dead 2 when Evil Dead 2 didn't even exist when House 1 was in production? Hell, Evil Dead 2 wasn't even a thing when House 1 was released. So how did it retread Evil Dead 2 when Evil Dead 2 never existed at the time of its release or production? How? Your comparison is dog shit here. It didn't steal anything from Evil Dead 2. It was its own thing. It just happened to be a horror comedy like Evil Dead 2. That's the only similarity.
And do nothing to sell the idea that this is either A, a haunted house, or B, the delusions of a veteran with PTSD, which the film limply suggests may be the case.
This movie has a void inside of its walls where all the living dead of the world exist. It totally kills it when it comes to the haunted house portion of this movie. I don't know how you say that it doesn't sell that it's a haunted house. What the fuck are you talking about? There's undead creatures oozing out of this house. But Matt here is just like, oh, no, I'm not convinced it's a fucking haunted house. Like, what the fuck do you think a haunted house does, dude? And as far as this guy having PTSD, he obviously does in this movie. I mean, he's a really good actor, and you can see him literally crying in some scenes where he relives his backflashes. How did that not convince you? I mean, as I've already stated, this guy is a good actor. If he can't sell you the fact that he has PTSD, no one can.
Before giving up entirely on convincing you it has any substance whatsoever. Suffice to say, House is not the best movie I've ever seen. It's not even the best movie with the title House. So how come then? How come I'm talking about this movie? Why am I even wasting my time on this movie? Longtime viewers of this channel should know the answer. Say it with me. Wet puppets. That's right, folks. Looking for some of the ooey gooeyest, wettest puppets you've ever seen? I'm talking gloopy. I'm talking gloppy. I'm talking slippery and slimy. Not quite as wet as the puppet in Brain Damage, but
Love that movie.
what House lacks in wetness of puppets, it makes up for in variety and sheer number of puppets. Let me run you through the, for lack of a better word, story.
Get it? It doesn't have a story because he doesn't like the story. No, it has a good story.
Roger Cobb is a hotshot horror writer. In the 80s, people thought there would be more than one of those, who's in a bit of a creative slump. He goes to visit his aunt, and she's hanging from a noose, so that's a bummer for him. Also a bummer, his career is falling apart because he can't manage to write his new book, a memoir of his time serving in the Vietnam War. His agent and the publishing company he works for are convinced this won't sell for some reason.
And listen, while we're on the subject of the book, Roger, nobody wants to read about the goddamn Vietnam War anymore. They want to read a good horror story.
Even though I feel like people love to read war books. Anyway, further bummers for Roger include his wife, a daytime soap star, has divorced him. And despite clearly being in love with one another, these two can't seem to find what it takes to get back together. Also, his son is missing. Last seen drowning in a haunted pool, but then he disappeared. What's up with that? Maybe we'll find out. He's also having flashbacks to his wartime experience. Cobb decides to stay at his aunt's place just to get some solitude and finish writing the book nobody wants. So I guess this is, in addition to being a ripoff of Evil Dead, also kind of a ripoff of The Shining.
Get it? Because this movie has somebody writing a book, and The Shining has somebody writing a book. So they're literally the same film! No, it doesn't work that way. They're not even the same genre. One's horror comedy. I know they sound similar because they both have horror in it, but they're certainly different tones. And certainly different in every single way, other than the fact that they both have a writer. But that's ripping off, ladies and gentlemen. That's ripping off.
And who's that neighbor who comes knocking around? Why, it's Norm from Cheers.
Love him.
Wants to be his friend so bad. Now, George Wendt's character in this movie is named Howard. But obviously, I will be calling him Norm henceforth. As if things couldn't get any worse for Roger, turns out his house is full of monster ghosts. Not in a subtle, oh, there's something in the corner of my eye kind of way, but more in a, there's an undead pile of corpses in my closet that grabs at me kind of way. And at this point, any sensible person might be like, well, completely f*** this. I'm not going to continue to stay here in this house full of monsters. If that's what you do, and it is, that's what anyone would do. Congrats! You're a better protagonist than Roger Cobb.
You're kind of glancing over the fact that in the beginning of the movie, before he moved into the house, not only did he not see any monsters, his aunt never even spoke of monsters. She just said that the house stole his child. She didn't mention monsters. Ever. He just thinks his aunt is crazy. And there isn't monsters oozing out of that house like you're stating. They only come out 12 o'clock on the dot, out of a very specific closet. So no, he didn't see the monsters and he wanted to stay even despite the monsters being there. You fucking liar. The movie's not that ridiculous. You're just making that shit up. Why are you doing that? Because you're needing a reason to shit on the movie when there's no good reason to shit on this great movie.
Who instead seems to forget he's living in a haunted house half of the time.
As I said before, that monster scene that Thought Slime showed doesn't happen till later in the movie when he discovers that there is ghost monsters in this house. So he showed that clip prematurely to make it seem like he experienced that before he stayed in the house, trying to paint him as if he's crazy for staying in that house despite being mauled by a monster, when that never happened to him yet. But he wanted to stay in that house because everybody said his aunt was crazy, but at the same time, if his aunt isn't crazy, he might get his son back from the house. So yeah, that's why he stayed. Because there was no threat of monsters that he knew of, and he had a chance of getting his son back. But the way you described it was that there was just tons of monsters, and why would he ever stay there, and there's no chance of getting his son back. You're totally skipping the fact why he stayed there. He stayed there because he wanted his son back. That was the intrigue. According to you, and according to what you told your audience, he stayed because he was crazy and he likes to be mauled by monsters. He's just a dad that missed his son and wanted him back.
Or go through some of the wildest and dumbest schemes to catch the ghosts like a half-baked Wile E. Coyote.
Yeah, because setting up cameras to take a picture of a monster that comes out of a closet is totally Wile E. Coyote. Like, he wasn't even trying to catch the monster. He was just trying to prove the monsters exist by taking a picture. So this is a false equivalence. Again, you're making shit up.
I'm just going to skip over about a third of this movie because it's irritating filler. Turns out, back in Nam, Roger refused to mercy kill a wounded comrade who was then captured and tortured horribly. You'd think maybe this movie would want you to sympathize with Big Ben, the torturee, but he's an asshole, and we're supposed to let Roger off the hook with it. The ghost of Big Ben has been pulling the strings the whole time. I don't know how the ghost of Big Ben made it back from Vietnam to Roger's aunt's house.
It's because the house acts as a gateway to the undead. It's not that hard to understand, dude. Listen to him reach and try to make it sound stupid.
Let us assume that the house acts as a ghost magnet of some kind, and it can attract ghosts from all over the world.
No, dude. Everyone dies and goes to this void, to this undead void. And this house has access to that void.
It was Ben, of course, that kidnapped Roger's son. And it was Ben that made a witch attack him. And it was Ben that put a pile of living corpses in the closet.
No, those are just random monsters from the undead void. Ben just happens to be one of the monsters from the void. And because Roger went to his aunt's house, who has access to the void, he was able to access Roger's child and steal him. But because he stole Roger's child doesn't mean he's orchestrating and controlling all the monsters like some puppeteer. You're lying to make the movie seem ridiculous and bad when none of this is even remotely true. Ben isn't the only fucking monster that exists in the void, dude. There's other monsters. There's other undead people. There's a lot of dead people in the world. So yeah, there's going to be lots of different monsters other than Ben in the void that try to attack and hurt people that are not related to Ben.
And then sucked him into the Shadow Realm.
Ben didn't even suck him into the Shadow Realm. That's something that Roger did voluntarily when he went through this mirror. Again, you are reaching for every one of these complaints about this movie. You're making all of it up. None of these bad things about the movie even exist.
But Roger's not afraid of you anymore, Ben. You have no power over him, which... that's not how any of the other ghosts in this movie worked. Why are they fear-powered now? Norm wasn't afraid of the corpse pile in the closet before he saw it, so why was he thought it was all just Roger's delusions? He shouldn't have been scared.
Okay, Roger told Harold that, okay, look, there isn't a ghost in my closet. Okay, you're right. It was actually a big raccoon. So let's kill this raccoon in my closet. Harold was getting scared, dude. When Roger told Harold to harpoon a giant fucking raccoon in his closet, he was literally shaking, dude. That's how scared he was. He was literally scared stiff. I mean, you could tell by his acting that he was absolutely selling the fact that he was absolutely terrified. And when it ended up not being a raccoon at all, it ended up being something even scarier, a big fucking monster, he literally almost shit his pants. Yes, it's true, earlier in the week, he thought Roger was crazy. But when Roger showed him a big fucking giant monster in his closet, no, he believed it. And he was afraid. So you're making this up too. You're making up everything.
But the ghost could still get him. How come the ghost could... what? Who cares? They blow the bad ghost up with a grenade. That's it. That's all. The end. Were you expecting some larger character arc for Roger? No, he overcame his fear of Big Ben, which didn't seem to be a thing before now. Like, he didn't mercy... he was afraid to mercy kill him.
When it struck 12 o'clock and he opened that closet and he saw that first monster, he was absolutely terrified. Absolutely terrified. And he got over that fear and destroyed all the monsters he came across. Like it or not, that is character development.
Didn't seem afraid of Big Ben. Didn't seem to like him too much, but what... everything about this movie is just half done.
What are you talking about? The special effects of this movie are excellent. Excellent. And it's scary, it's funny, it's entertaining. I mean, there's nothing wrong with this movie, dude. This is a great movie. I'd even argue that it's a classic.
It has some fun puppets, don't get me wrong, and some of them are very wet. But beyond that, there really isn't much here for most people. Everything it does was done better somewhere else, and by somewhere else I mean specifically the film Evil Dead 2.
And Evil Dead 2 came after House. So if anybody stole anything, it was Evil Dead 2 stealing from House. But you don't say that. You say the opposite. You say that House stole from Evil Dead 2, even though Evil Dead 2 didn't exist when House came out. You make no sense! Yes, Evil Dead 2 is a horror comedy, and House is a horror comedy. But that doesn't make them the same film.
And none of what it does is all that original or surprising, because again, it is literally just the shittier version of Evil Dead 2.
The story and the scenes are completely different.
And with that out of the way, next week, I'm free to discuss House 2, the second With that out of the way, I'm free to discuss House 2, the second story. And for the next 3 weeks, I will be talking about the House sequels.
Now, you know how Army of Darkness is like Evil Dead 2 without the horror aspects? It just ramps up the comedy. That's exactly what House 2 does with House 1. It removes the horror aspects and just goes the comedy route, and it's brilliant. House 2 is even better than House 1. And the fact that this guy's going to say House 2 sucks just proves to me that this dude has terrible taste.
No, there's not a chance. You want me to do a series on the House movies?
So the comedy of House, the Thought Slime, is just god-awful. But the comedy he's doing right here is just brilliant. I mean, he's going to review a movie he doesn't like. Isn't that funny? That's just comedy gold. I'm laughing so hard my sides hurt.
That nobody cares about or remembers. You want me to talk about the sequels to this movie? Nobody's ever seen this movie. You want me to do that over Christmas? When our numbers are most important? This movie has nothing to do with Christmas. This is going to tank our numbers.
Okay, that's enough of that bullshit. Anyways, I hope you guys like my my debunking of his review. I know that's a little weird. It's its own like subgenre, but I hope you enjoyed it.